I'm going to die. I'm under siege now, and these dreams don't just come when I'm asleep. And I don't sleep anymore. Not really. I can't. Not after what I saw on the hill. Seeing what I saw and knowing what I know. I started off doing this very, very much alone, but I've never ever felt more alienated and cut off. That thing inside Chris's body, seeing it, touching it, it's changed me. What happened to him, how he'd been hollowed out to be a host, to be a vessel, and just, worst of all, just knowing that could be me and that Chris was still in there. He didn't have eyes. His eyes were glass and his flesh was lacquered. But the hesitation, the resistance, it was constant. And not when his hands touched me, when it touched me, I felt agony. It was just a moment. It was just the briefest moment. But that was enough. They didn't find a body from the stalker that I just pitched over the precipice up at the top. I've been checking, I've been keeping a watch over local news and, fearing, and this is pretty ridiculous, just a knock at the door from the police, excuse me, sir, we found a naked wild man and you're under arrest. But nothing showed up. So that either means he's dead and something took him away, or he got up himself and is somehow still alive. So the blood on that man, it was thicker. It was thicker than it should have been. It's like sticky, like tar or honey, and the colour of like watery ketchup, like plasma. God, the smell. I got some on my hoodie, and the stink of it. We've talked about this before. It's like, kind of like how horrible these things smell. But what I got on my hoodie, it wasn't just foul. It was wrong. It was disorientating. Like batteries. I don't know. That's all I can think of. It's like if you ever catch the whiff of broken batteries, it will scratch out your nostrils anytime you catch a whiff of it, and I'm gagging just to think about it. It's so much stronger than you would expect as a scent and as a smell. It's raw and foul. The worst part, the worst part of all of this is I can still feel it. I can still feel it on my face, like gripping my face whenever I'm not distracted, whenever I'm not talking, whenever I'm not babbling, whenever I'm not just doing something. I can still feel it. That thing, the thing that came outside of Chris, the thing that lives in him, the thing that wants me. I can feel it shivering with like a rapturous ecstasy when I screamed into it, like screaming into a fucking bag, like the echoes of just bouncing back at me from the black. And it sounded like all those lambs that I've heard since I was a child, the dark creatures just in the dark, just. But it's not just the lamb. It's not just my screams. It's millions of voices, and they're all screaming, synchronized. Just a synchronized, horrific scream. I need a drink of water. Give me a second. Oh. I'm sorry. I'm working myself up into panic attacks. Just near constantly. My breathing is just so wrong. It's not been right since. not been right since. In the dark, when I was staring, when it was on my face, the more I saw in that darkness, the more I saw the outline of the tree. Just veins against the black. It's just somehow darker than the absolute darkness around it. Bronchial fingers tearing a gash in it. I don't know how something can be darker than utter dark. I don't understand. It drew everything in, feeding off misery, feeding off fear. And I must have just passed out, because when I woke up, I was lying on wildflowers beneath a completely clear sky. The wind was whipping over my face and the muscles in my cheeks were still spasming. And it wasn't until that stopped that I could finally just move and stagger down Cavehill. I moved as quickly as possible. I didn't see a soul, and I worked my way down the quarry path, that place that I thought would be. But I remember just tearing my hoodie off me to get rid of that rancid smell that was just kind of all over it. And oh my God, I'm sorry. I had to step away for a second there. I hope you understand. I don't think there's much more that can be said about that day. I really don't. I think I've said everything that I can bring myself to say about it for now. I mean, the one thing that I did remember, and if I want to kind of like hold on to things, and that's the important thing here, is holding on to things that are normal. It's holding on to things that we can actually follow through and use to keep a grip on normality and reality, right? Well, there's so much to talk about here, but one of the things from the chase and one of the things that really came up was, could I be related to Chris? And that doesn't mean a close relation. It doesn't mean, it's my brother. Not a chance in hell. But those distant relatives, like old blood shared, distant in a way where you wouldn't even know they exist. There's no connection. You just share something, and I don't have any good plans anymore. Everything's just a last chance grasp. So I got a DNA test and I sent it out just to see if I could link up a genetic relationship with anybody else who's experienced this. It's one of the few things that I have to go off, is that we're both redheads with terrible history, and I will take anything that gives me information, anything that creates a sense of logic and puts this in a framework that isn't breaking me. It's the longest shot, but I don't care. I don't care. I mean, I've been increasingly concerned about my neighbor. He hasn't posted on any social media, and it's probably not even since I thought he was on holiday, and now I'm not even so sure. There's creeks next door, but there's creeks everywhere. With the silence and the fear, I'm just hearing so much more than I ever did before. Not just the ghosts and the nightmares, but every little creak and every little noise. And it could just be paranoia, but that's all this started, right? Like, is this paranoia? Is this fear? I called the police pretending to be a concerned relative, requested a wellness check. They never came. They never turned up. I called again. I got the same answer. I don't know if they ever came out. I've been looking out the window for days now, but they never came. And that might just be the paranoia. But it's not like this house has never creaked before, right? I'm babbling. I'm sorry. So the day before I took that walk, I went to see a priest. I'm always ranting whenever I watch horror movies. Just go see a priest, dude. I pretty much scream it at the screen. I'm not religious by any stretch, but to me, it's like an electrician or a plumber, right? And you know, if you need somebody to deal with a specific thing, you go to the person who's supposed to be able to deal with that specific thing. And, you know, they may be a scam artist, but you don't know until you try. So just like hiring any contractor, if you've ever tried to get a painter to just come and do a simple job, or, you know, said, my plumbing's screwed, I need somebody right away. Just like hiring any contractor, this was a pain in the ass. You can't move in this country without hitting a church. They're on every corner. But I couldn't just go to the nearest one. I had to speak to a specific priest who only had an opening that afternoon on the other side of the city. You know, it's not what I expected when reaching out to say, like, I need help was most definitely not, you know, to be sent down this route. So I hopped on the bus, I headed across the city, and I don't know if it's just the weirdness that I've been experiencing, and like I feel like I'm repelling people, maybe. I don't know. It just felt like there were less people around than before. It felt like in 2020, if you ever managed to leave the house and there were barely anybody in the streets and it was off and strange and you could see every piece of paper drifting down the road, you could hear every kind of like sound off in the distance. It's similar to that. And I was in Belfast city centre and I was like, you know, just walking down past the Castle Court shopping centre. And this just stuck with me. This moment before I got to the kind of like church, there was a guy, and he was just you'll know exactly the type of person I'm talking about. He looked like he was like drunk, absolutely like drunk out of his mind. And sorry, I just got like a message there reminding me that I need to go outside for a moment. So if you'll give me a brief second, I'll be right back. Anytime like I get those alerts, I go outside now just to kind of like catch my breath for reasons that I will go into later on. Okay, my apologies for that. Like, I think I've calmed down a little bit now as well. So, yeah, I ran into this guy. Cheeks were kind of like flushed red. There was like bruises like just below his eye. He had like a kind of little beanie cap on. And he was, you know, just, he looked older than he probably was, but he was capering, is the only word. He was hopping from foot to foot, pointing into the road and waving like an old phone. Like he was like, oh, I gotta look at this, buddy. Look at this. And I tried to be polite and I just turned and looked and there was a seagull. And it was gripping the head of a pigeon that wasn't quite dead, and it was wrenching it left and right, just pulling and ripping and tearing. There was just blood and feathers and guts trailed in the road, and this pigeon was kind of like, it was trying to fluff its wing, and this seagull was just tearing and wrenching, and this guy with his gap-toothed grin was cackling. And I saw on his phone wasn't even switched on. It was just a black screen, and it looked like he was filming it for, I don't know, the guy probably doesn't have a TikTok. Like, let's be honest, like he was just, and he just kind of like stood there looking like he was filming it. It was like some kind of performance art, and it was just a weird, ugly moment. And as I walked past, he like reached out and I instinctively just kind of like took a hard step to the right so he didn't connect with me. And he just kept laughing. Like, I don't think he meant me any harm. I think he wanted to pull me in and watch the show with him. I've never seen somebody so delighted by something so disturbing. But I got past that. I walked on, aware again that the city was just very quiet. And I entered the church, big doors. And this is really dumb. Maybe it's just a holdover, right? Like, I genuflected automatically. I'm not religious. There was no kind of real meaning to it, but I kind of respectfully genuflected because the way I was raised, and I don't even know, it came up very, very quickly. Yeah, I remember that. I remember thinking to myself, why did you do that? And, it's some things you just kind of ingrained in yourself. And I remember walking to the kind of back of the church, took myself to the side, and the priest had come out, the sacristy, and he kind of motioned me forward, and we walked in, shook his hand, and he was very attentive, and he was very pleasant. And we sat down in his office, and he listened to what I had to say. I explained what I'd been experiencing, and he nodded and immediately referred me to another priest who was a specialist in such spiritual matters. And he kind of asked me if I wouldn't mind if he called them. And so he rang them up on some kind of ecclesiastical bat phone, for this specific guy who listened to me. And he was very attentive and he was very pleasant, before referring me along to a more specialized specialist who was equally attentive and pleasant, just with an Italian accent. And the original priest said he was going to leave the room and give me privacy, and it felt like I was dealing with customer service, just like when nobody knows how to solve your issue. And the only difference being, if I call my ISP about getting the internet back on and they arse about like this, I'm not getting hollowed out by a cosmic fucking horror. God, so stupid. Oh my God. But Italian priest, he heard me out, and he had some follow-up questions for me, and I was expecting some suggestions, but instead he took my email and he took my phone number and said he would get back to me. He would get back to me as soon as possible. And the priest whose office I was in, he was a nice enough guy, and I didn't want to say that I doubted a few Hail Marys would help, and I politely gave a maybe about coming back on Sunday for a service, or, coming in for confession, which it's a lie to a church in a priest. But you know what? They didn't exactly solve my issue there and then or give me any direction, so whatever. They were perfectly nice, but on the way home, I grabbed some groceries, and that's the very first actual time that I caught the scent of a stalker. And it wasn't close by, but it caught me off guard because I'd understood Chris's description of it very, very perfectly. The acrid, aggressive smell. But more than just the scent, when I got on the bus to head home, I was sure I saw her. The stalker woman from Chris's pictures on the Google Drive. And she was just standing there, staring through the bus window as it drove past with that horrible active weariness that they have. And I wasn't sure at first, but the look in her eyes, after my experience on Cavehill, I know for sure it was the same emptiness. It was that same cold insanity, exactly the same as the man that I threw off the side of McCart's fort at the top of Cavehill. So why does that matter? Why? Well, firstly, I knew they were following me. I'd had that experience the day before Cavehill, but again, it's just something that happened in passing. You don't think anything of it, right? You don't believe, well, this is a thing. It's no, it's something that occurs and you don't really think about it too hard. And then afterwards, of course, you're like, oh yeah, with that, it wouldn't have changed anything. But that actual story, what does it matter? Why have I wanted to talk about that? Why is it important to say? Well, the Italian priest I was put on the phone to, he did send me an email. I didn't check it until, a couple of days after the chase, and only then after I'd found some semblance of recovery. So there's a lot of things that I've struggled to believe over the past month, and I've had to become open-minded to survive. But even then, with that, I had to read this multiple times and step away from the screen. Remember when I was first exploring the paranormal forum and Chris's post, there were numerous spam links removed? Well, in this email, no connection to me, the barest understanding of the situation. This priest, who for all I know is sitting in the Vatican, sent me this email. So they wrote, let's bring this up. And I'm not going to do this in an Italian accent. It would be offensive, and just I may slip into it by accident. I'm going to try not to, because I don't re-record these when I do them. My apologies if I do. I'm obviously not going to say my name, so Mr. Beep, thank you for your call earlier. Unfortunately, what you describe is not something I would be able to assist with, but I encourage you to reach out and explain the situation to the good people at the Society for Cultural and Historical Research. They are most keen to discuss such situations with you, and you can call them at this phone number. I am hoping that this will provide some comfort, and I will keep you in my prayers. So the priest provided me with the contact information for the same place that had been spamming Chris's forum 10 years ago. And that can't be a coincidence. So when I told admin about it, they were as taken aback as I was, and they recommended I don't call and I don't click any links without doing some due diligence. And she's sure that she can look into it. I'm too close to the situation. We've discussed a lot lately, me and her, about what's happening. And, we need to figure out what historical society has to do with this, and why an Italian-based Monsignor in the Catholic Church is sending me links to it after hearing my story. Well, it 100% threw me for a loop, and I need to know more. I absolutely need to know more. So I'm going to leave it there today. I'm cutting things a little bit short because I'm actually traveling tonight. I reached out to a friend of mine and said, I would really appreciate it if I can come and stay with you for a few days for my own, health. I obviously didn't tell her everything, but I just think it would be good for me to get the hell out of this house and as far away from here as possible for a few days, maybe longer, somewhere where I can just relax. And admin has been amazing, but we haven't really had a chance to sit and go over things because I've been such a funk. I've been so down and scared of what I will find. I really want to sit down and I want to find out more about the society. I want to see what happened to the others. I want to know what the hell we're dealing with. So my plan is to leave tonight, get to Manchester, settle in, just relax, and also in that calm, start finding a way forward. So I'm just hoping that for a short while at least I can find some peace, and in that peace, just a way forward. Well, that didn't work, and things are worse than ever. Join me next time and I'll tell you how, if I'm still alive.